Hey folks, welcome to today's episode of the Alix Mayer Show. Today, I'm going to be talking to Lara Logan, and it's really exciting because she was actually a house guest in my house. So before we had anything set up for the Alix Mayer Show, she came in studio and did the interview. I love Lara Logan. She is so impressive. She was on 60 Minutes in the 1990s, and I just loved her reporting then. And now she has her own show called Going Rogue. And if you're worried about the surveillance state, Lara Logan has the answer. We're going to be talking about a digital Bill of Rights and why that is so very important for our freedom now and in the future. She's a true veteran investigative reporter, and you are going to be blown away at what she has to say today. So welcome. The Alix Mayer Show is sponsored by Mish International, specialists in gold and silver since 1963. When you need to defend your health from the regulatory state, you support this podcast and the dedicated people at Free Now Foundation. When you need to defend your savings from the state's monetary system, you contact the dedicated people at Mish International. Mish International is a family business that offers true integrity, reliability, and fair pricing of gold and silver. Visit their website at mishinternational.com. That's MISH international.com. Lara Logan, thank you so much for being on the Alix Mayer Show.
This is very exciting.
It's all my pleasure. And we just had a great lunch with a bunch of amazing people.
Very special. Yeah, that was really interesting, actually. I'm encouraged to see how well-informed people are.
They truly are. They asked the best questions. They really did. And I'm going to be asking you more questions today. And so I want to talk about your origin story in case anybody out there doesn't know who you are. I think everybody does.
Plenty of people that don't. Sure. Well, born and raised in South Africa, became a print journalist when I was 17, worked in print, radio, television, been a journalist for more than 35 years, 16 years as the chief foreign affairs correspondent for CBS, 60 Minutes as well. And now I have my own show, Going Rogue with Lara Logan. And been a journalist for more than 35 years.
That's incredible. I remember seeing you on 60 Minutes and admiring you in the 1990s.
Yes.
I never thought I'd be sitting with you in my house.
I loved my time there.
That's amazing.
I really did. Worked with some amazing people. Mm.
And you've bounced around a little bit, and you're known for going rogue. And is
Yes.
that why you now have your own show?
I think everyone can recognize that the media has been through sort of some very unexpected turbulence over the last, 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, I never for a moment ever thought I would end up as an independent journalist. I worked in newspapers, then in radio and newspapers, then radio, newspapers, and television. I loved being part of a team at CBS and 60 Minutes, and we did amazing work. And so I would have stayed there forever. But the media around me changed, just like the political landscape changed around all of us. And we moved into a time where I used to be the person that when people would say to me, why is the media so biased? I didn't grow up in the United States. I didn't have that Democrat-Republican thing hanging over me. And I would be like, what are they talking about? Like, nobody tells me what to say. I don't understand why they say that. And then, of course, the rise of Fox News was really the first time that I became aware that, okay, wow, people are so disenfranchised and so upset that this is thriving.
How interesting. What year was that?
Well, when did Roger Ailes establish Fox? I know in the war in Iraq, there were a few Fox correspondents there, and it had only been going for a couple of years. So I don't remember the exact date that Fox began, but I think it was in the early 2000s.
And how were people disenfranchised at that time?
Because they weren't, their views were not represented in any way, shape, or form by the media, except in a disparaging or negative way. So we would do quaint stories about why rural voters are voting conservative, and it's a shame. Yeah, but never mind. Let's give them their 3-minute segment so we can say we cover both sides. It was that kind of thing. And it was, if we did, this happened to me at the Capitol. I was coming out of a meeting, got caught in a jam because there was a huge a big pro-life demonstration, and they were trying to get inside the building, and so security was jammed up, and I got caught up with this crowd, and one of them said to me, "Why do you people in the media hate us so much?" And I was like, I didn't hate anyone. So I was like, what are you talking about? And they were like, well, the only coverage you do of us is negative. So that got me thinking, and I started to watch. And over the next few years, I saw it was true. We didn't do any stories about anyone who was pro-life that didn't say that this religious zealot or this lunatic or this nutter, wanted to blow up an abortion clinic or something like that. Other than that, outside of that, their views had no legitimacy whatsoever, not on air and not in the newsrooms. And so that got me thinking, wait a minute, what is the pro-life movement? What is this about? Because I was a my body, my choice girl growing up, right? Well, what do you mean you're going to tell me what I can and can't do with my body? And then I, over the years, what I came to realize is that there's a lot of deception in all of these things.
There is.
There really is.
And what part of the agenda were you not aware of when you were doing those stories about the quaint rural voters who were pro-life?
Well, we didn't really consider anything they thought or believed in as legitimate. They weren't legitimate. They were sort of aberrations. We were legitimate and our views were legitimate and they were ancient truths that could never, they were unassailable. Roe v. Wade was unassailable. And just the idea that that another way of looking at it could be just as legitimate it's not a concept I ever heard.
Right.
There were certain things that were universally true. Okay, if you're pro-life, you're a lunatic. You're a crazy person. If you are extremely religious, you're a nutter. If you, if you're Republican, you're like, oops. Like, you know what I mean?
It's an oops. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an oops. It's like Republicans are, boring and hypocritical and not funny and not fun. Like comedy belongs to the left.
Well, in these days, being conservative is considered pathological by a lot of psychologists, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah, people are being diagnosed with it.
Amazing. I'm not a huge fan of psychologists. I mean, nothing personal to anybody, but I'm just not a huge fan of a profession that has put ideology over the well-being of vulnerable people, which is what they've done en masse. So, I mean, I don't have anything against it. If people need help and that's helpful for them, then absolutely go to it. But
the labels are not helpful.
The role that therapists and psychologists and school counselors and all of them have played in exploiting the most vulnerable among us, I think is a real indictment on the profession.
It's becoming worse and worse. They're really just part of the ideology now, and they shouldn't be. They've lost their course.
I'm lucky enough that I grew up in a big family with a lot of people that yelled at you and didn't hesitate to shout you down and and toss you out when you were, if you were or uppity. So we were very grounded. We kept each other in line, and there was no room for floof, right? It was like, yeah, no, okay, you got to deal in reality.
You really do. And a lot of people I don't think are right now. And so you saw the Fox News coming on the scene, and it started an evolution in you that you probably didn't recognize was happening at the time. And now you've evolved completely away from the liberal left, as far as I know. Is that correct?
I mean, I don't ever think about it, to be honest with you. I don't think the liberal left exists anymore, because I don't think the left today is liberal in any way, shape, or form. I mean, to be liberal, don't you have to believe in freedom and tolerance and things like equality, not equity, which is a forced outcome? So I don't see anything liberal about the left. And it's become so extreme in so many ways. Like, if you're literally voting for people who think it's fine to have full-term abortions, what is that? It's murder. It's not liberalism. And if you are going to be, I don't have any issue with, people live and let live, right? That's how I'm a live and let live person.
Yeah. Libertarian.
Libertarians are kind of a little bit like Switzerland, like just sit on that fence. Yeah. Not stand for anything too inconvenient. So, I mean, sometimes yes, in some ways libertarian, in other ways not, in some ways liberal, in some ways not, in some ways conservative, in some ways not. I just think I'm sane.
You are. You're very sane.
You know what I mean? Above everything else, I'm just sane.
Yeah.
And I try to do the right thing for the right reason. And I try to learn so that I can have an informed opinion about something. But I'm not, you can't be informed about everything. There's things I get wrong. There's things I don't know. Things that all of us don't know. So I just think that that dividing society up into these these places, they shift and change over time. They're false labels, and
Yeah.
in a way, they're traps.
And they're artificial divides to keep us fighting and
That's
weak and not
it.
thinking about who's really oppressing us, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. Artificial divides. I
Yeah.
love that. Because, I think COVID showed us that, right? And that's kind of what brought you and I together. That's
Yes.
how we met. What I appreciated about COVID, which is an odd thing to say because I don't appreciate what was done, but I just mean that if there's anything that we learn that comes out of adversity, or negative things, because COVID, of course, was a very negative operation, but it's that it exposed much of what we're dealing with beyond partisan lines.
It sure did.
And a lot of those people who were, granola hippies or naturalists or, people who wanted to focus on a strong immune system over pharmaceuticals, a lot of these people were on the left, a lot of them were on the right, but it brought them together because it showed them that I'm not your enemy, right? You're not my enemy.
Right.
These artificial divides are superseded by this terrible thing they've done to all of us.
Right. But that also presumes that people know the direction this is all going and that COVID was just the beginning. Those artificial divides would go away in an instant if everybody knew where they were trying to take us, right?
Probably. Yeah.
Right. So what was your first clue? What was the first tell for you that there was something wrong with the COVID narrative?
The first minute.
Yeah. Tell me, what was your first minute?
Well, I didn't believe it.
What didn't you believe?
Any of it. I mean, I didn't believe any of it. I mean, sure, there was an unknown factor.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not all seeing and all knowing. So absolutely there was an unknown factor. But so, I'm married to someone who was in the world of intelligence. So the moment COVID-19 was announced, he said, oh, what happened to all the other variants? And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, why do you think it's called 19? It's the 19th iteration of a man-made virus.
Oh, it didn't have to do with 2019? That's what I always thought.
No.
Okay. It's the 19th one.
Yes. It's the
Interesting.
19th version of COVID.
Okay.
So even if it began, if the first COVID was in a lab, was real, was natural,
Mm-hmm.
the iterations of it are how we give it those names.
Mm-hmm.
And so he knew instantly, he said, oh, I wonder what the other happened to the other variants. Like
Right.
why the
Well-
19th variant. And so that was the very first conversation we ever had. And I knew immediately that it was engineered in a lab. That's why it was given that variant number. And
Because something natural wouldn't have sequential numbers like that. And we
No.
used to call coronavirus the common cold, just like adenovirus was the common cold. And then suddenly it's
Yeah.
deadly.
well, when the flu comes around every year,
Mhm.
the virus is always different, right? But do they call it different names?
That's right. It's
They
just the
call it flu.
Yeah.
So when it's COVID-19, when you have 19 variants, that's your indicator that it was engineered in a lab by humans.
That's a tell if you know what you're looking for.
Instantly.
Very much.
Yes.
My tell was actually a media tell because when I saw them all coming out with the same narrative about bat
Oh.
soup in China, I thought, okay, now that's really weird that they're all on the same page with that. However, number one, I don't think the Chinese eat bats and I don't think they eat bat soup because what an inconvenient food. I mean, you get scratched or bitten to death when you go to catch your dinner.
They're Chinese, Alex.
Okay, well, still, I don't think that's number one food on their menu.
But they eat dogs and cats.
Well, and then the other tell for me was, okay, we're talking about a virus which is killed by heat. So if this coronavirus is in a bat soup that's heated, how could it be infectious? Because it's in a soup which is heated. And I'm pretty sure that the Chinese also weren't eating gazpacho made out of bats.
Well, see, that wasn't have been such an indicator for me just because I had done other stories like Ebola,
Mm-hmm.
where scientists told me that it came from bats. And I had actually in researched a story where I wanted to go to this bat cave in Africa. It's just in a remote part with these scientists and because apparently quite a few diseases have been traced to that bat cave. Now I'm not so sure that story was even correct. And I'll tell you why, because when I was in the graveyard in Liberia, it was at the height of the Ebola epidemic. And we'd been warned, they didn't want us going to the graveyard because when people die from Ebola, what happens is that the capillaries that are held by a membrane, right? And membrane is the right term, but your capillaries are closed. And with Ebola, those walls melt away. And so you bleed out of every part of your body that you can bleed out of, your eyes, everything, right? Every orifice. Yeah. And at the moment of death, of course, you're bleeding the most. And so that's why a lot of people get Ebola from handling the bodies. I'm not going to go into the science of it and get attacked by every scientist out there, but it is well known that handling the bodies and the graveyards and everything to do with the death with Ebola patients is very, very dangerous for transmission. So they didn't want us to go there, but we were in the graveyard because there were people burying the bodies, taking that risk. And of course, in the frontline treatment center where we were, the people handling the bodies were heavily, heavily protected and so on and so on. Anyway, I'm talking to the grave diggers and they're asking me over and over. In Liberia, they have a pidgin accent. They're like, where did Ebola come from? Mm-hmm. And I said, the bats. And then another guy would say to me, but blah, 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 blah. And I don't understand, where did Ebola come from? I'd be like, from the bats. They don't look convinced. So I said, hold on. There's a guy who knows much more about this than I do. And we had a scientist with us. His name was Joseph Fair. Incredible scientist, hemorrhagic scientist who was a specialist in blood infections and diseases and so on, anything to do with the blood. So I said, Joseph, come on over here. And he was a lovely, lovely man. And he'd lived for years in Africa, and he'd been on the front line of the epidemic when it began. He'd lost many friends and people he cared about a lot. And I said, Joseph, these gentlemen would like to talk to you. They have some questions about the origin of Ebola. And so he said, sure. He's chatting away to them, and they're like, where did Ebola come from? And he's like, well, from the bats, that cave, blah, blah, blah. And this one guy looks at him, I never forget this, and he says, did Ebola come from the bat? I don't understand how did Ebola come from the bat. And Joseph said, well, it's because you eat bats, right? And they all said, yes, we eat bats. And this man looked at him and he said, but he said, yes, I eat the bat. He said, but my father ate the bat and no Ebola. My grandfather ate the bat and he know Ebola. And his grandfather ate the bat and he know Ebola. Mm-hmm. So where did Ebola come from? They didn't believe it because they knew. They knew they had generations. For generations, they'd all been eating bats. Interesting. And they didn't get any of these diseases. So now when I hear, it comes from the bat, I'm like, where did Ebola come from?
Okay, and I just didn't think bats were a big thing on the menu, but you're saying people have been eating bats for generations, and they know Ebola doesn't come from the bats. So
that's in Africa.
Going back to the 19th variant of COVID, which indicates that it's made in a lab.
Yes, and the other part of it is that the United States has the number one surveillance system in the world. Okay, the NSA is the crown jewel of digital surveillance and global surveillance. So we have many countries beating a path to our door, and I'd covered this extensively in other forms of reporting, right? So I already knew that. So I hear, there's a lab in China, it's doing this, and we didn't know. Really?
Yeah.
Not true.
Right. Because we have Ralph Barrick now in Eco Health Alliance.
But before we knew about Ralph Barrick and Eco Health Alliance, I asked people in the intelligence world, is it possible that we didn't know what they're doing in a lab in China? And they laughed because you realize from the time they start, if they're building a lab, we monitor it every minute of the day when it's being built.
Of course we do.
Okay, maybe you're adapting a lab. So if they have a lab somewhere, the chances that someone is working on something and we don't know about it are so slim. It's just, and then the other part of it was, I had a very good friend who was a doctor, and he told me within a week, there's strands of TB and HIV inside this virus. That does not occur in nature. Right. So, and he sent me all the paperwork. And you know what else he sent me? The paperwork, the official stories where Congress under Obama had banned gain-of-function research. And what does gain-of-function means? It means the virus gains functions that don't occur naturally in the virus, right?
Right. You're passaging it through cells,
you're
and then
giving
what
it
comes
functions.
Out can be more virulent or less, but they take the more and they put it in new cells.
Or you're giving it capability it didn't have. So say you have a virus that doesn't kill people but makes them really sick. Well, you give it the ability to kill them. You can gain a function means it gains additional functions, additional properties it didn't have naturally. And so that has to occur. That's engineered, manipulated, right? It doesn't happen in nature. No. So that was the one thing he told me about. It had strands of HIV and TB in it. So you knew that had been engineered by human hand, number one. And number two, I think it was my husband who pointed this out, and I verified this with multiple doctors. Viruses do not replicate identically in hot and cold climates.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No. So depending on the temperature, it determines how fast they replicate and so on and so on and so on, right? Because like Ebola doesn't last in direct sunlight.
Right.
Right. The sunlight kills it. So if you drop something on the ground inside or in dark at night, the virus is still active. If you drop it in the sun after a certain few minutes or whatever it is, I can't remember, it dies.
Well, and that's why viruses are said to be either highly deadly or highly contagious, right? Because something like Ebola that's highly deadly is not very contagious because people aren't going around and it dies on the surface.
Yes.
Right? And so that was the other mystery about COVID. How could it be both? It was so contagious and so deadly. Right. That was another tell.
Because that was another tell. And part of that was that you have COVID ravaging all these cold countries and ravaging all these hot countries at exactly the same time. Mm-hmm. Well, that was another sign that you had two different types of COVID.
So interesting.
That were being released. So there were just so many things.
Yeah.
And then also there was no evidence that masks would help. If you ask any doctor at the time, that knew what they were talking about, the virus was so tiny, those masks weren't doing anything. So there was just one lie after another. And the basic things, wash your hands after you eat. If you don't want COVID, wash your hands after you eat.
Exactly.
Wash your food when you're cooking it. Those are the things that prevent COVID. So there was nothing about COVID that wasn't dishonest or inaccurate.
It's so true. On the masks, I used to joke and say, well, I like to go to the grocery store and put sand in my shopping cart to illustrate, the power of a mask to keep out a virus, right?
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
that's like good. Carrying sand in a shopping cart or, putting up the chain link fence to keep out a mosquito, right? The holes and the size of the virus just never made any sense.
I know.
None at all. So before we go forward in the COVID narrative, which I'm very, very interested in, what have you learned now that you didn't know in 2019 about the run-up to COVID?
Well, you probably know a lot more about this than I do because this is your beat and you have great sources and you put so much hard work into this. So now what I know is that when Congress banned gain-of-function research, what we figured out what these people do is they find another way to do it. So the outward face to the world is, well, gain-of-function seems dangerous. We can't control it. It can't be controlled, and therefore it could lead to some, drastic outcomes. So we're going to ban it. But we're not really going to ban it because we've got to know how to do this. So that's when the NIH farmed out their gain-of-function research using Ralph Baric and EcoHealth Alliance and Chapel Hill University and the Wuhan lab. Mm-hmm. So now I do remember, I think it was David Martin who talked about this. This was years ago, of course, when I heard him speak. But I do remember all the conversation about Ralph Baric actually traveling between Wuhan and the United States, and it being believed by a number of people that he hand carried that virus.
He hand carried it.
Mm-hmm,
oh, I had not heard
on
that
one
before.
Of those trips. Now, I can't tell you that that's 100% true.
Yeah.
But I do know that Ralph Baric and EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Danzig and Chapel Hill University, another way they hide things that they do is they do it through universities. They do it through academic organizations, think tanks, foreign countries. So they basically just continued the gain-of-function work under those agencies. And of course, when you look at Agenda 2030 and all of that, right?
Yep.
And all the globalist organizations that were involved in planning for pandemics. The other thing that bothered me about COVID instantly, do you remember it was like on day 2 when they started talking about the new normal?
Yes, it was very early.
And that I was like, everyone's like, what do you mean the new normal? Why is this our new normal?
Right.
Why do we have a new normal? Like, I still want to go back to before I had to wear a mask and when I didn't have to give up my civil liberties or my, or trample the Bill of Rights. And you're talking about the new normal. And that indicated that there was the speed with which they introduced that, the breadth of it, how they got everybody, like you said, singing from the same hymn sheet. Mm-hmm. All of those were bad signs that they had a new normal and they wanted us to get there.
Right. Right. And how many people couldn't see it at that time? You and I could see it at the time that something was totally abnormal, but so many people were ready to accept it.
There are people who still wear masks.
Yes, that's true.
I saw one yesterday in the airport.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
Okay.
In California, right? In the Bay Area?
When we got off the plane.
Yeah,
in San Francisco. The first person I saw was an Asian lady wearing a mask.
They're very bought in here. Truly. Truly. When we first got the masks, I didn't like wearing them and I didn't believe in them from the get-go because I went and looked at the science. And so I took a Sharpie and I wrote on my first surgical mask, flatten the fear. But it turned out that the joke was on me because I was breathing in Sharpie fumes the whole time I was in the grocery store, which is so much worse.
Than plain CO2.
I'm like, oh shoot, my protest is terrible. It's bad for me.
I very reluctantly wore a mask on planes. Outside of that, I didn't wear them. We got into fights in our local grocery store and on the street and in the Walgreens and whatever.
Same. Yeah, after that was the last time I wore a mask. And after that, I would just nicely say to somebody, I'm sorry, thank you so much for letting me know about masks, but I can't wear one safely. And I shopped without one, but planes, you had to.
I wore them on planes. I regret it. I feel like a coward for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I know some people who really didn't. Who didn't ever put on a mask anywhere.
I would wear it below my nose on the plane once I got on.
But I always wore it below my nose because I couldn't breathe. I'm claustrophobic and it was suffocating. That's why I can't believe that people would still willingly choose to wear a mask. Also because, that's when all the Antifa, BLM stuff was still going on.
They could hide behind that mask.
Yes,
it was the uniform of the time.
And they wear those masks. So they were easily identifiable as Antifa because they had masks on. Once you put masks on everyone, it was easy to get away with it. You just blended into the crowd.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we're going into COVID now and they're doing the masks and they're doing all the lockdowns. California was really, really bad. We were told that we couldn't get together with our loved ones over Christmas if the hospital rates went above 75% occupancy, and we were hovering right at 74%, and actually found out that they were fudging the numbers on hospital beds in Santa Clara County to make it look like we were right at 74%. So we were 1% away of not being able to see our families at Christmas, and that they were using that to control us very much.
And in such a cruel way to torture us.
It was cruel.
It was cruel.
It was.
I mean, look at how many people, have you ever looked at the dementia rates in old age homes?
No.
Dementia went through the roof because elderly people were put in solitary confinement.
Yeah, and their only anchor were their loved ones and they weren't there.
And they were denied it. There were videos that circulated. I mean, people banging on the glass, and how many people, it was like, for elderly people in homes, it was like being put in solitary confinement. Mm-hmm. No human contact.
It's cruel.
It was vindictive and
it's
cruel.
Inhumane. Absolutely
inhumane. Not to mention, kids that were locked up with their abusers, women that were locked up in home with their abusers. I mean, a friend of my sister's, she had a lady who worked for her in South Africa, and her niece was beaten to death by her violent husband during COVID lockdowns.
I've heard a lot of stories like that, and the drug abuse. And even kids who went off to college, they test positive for COVID the day they get there, and they have to go to a hotel or get locked in their dorm for a week or two.
If they could even go to college. What about all the kids who might, I mean, there were kids who didn't have graduation, right? Right.
Yeah, my kids didn't from high school. They didn't have it. They drove around in cars.
Yeah, I went to one of those, someone else's graduation, driving around in cars. I buried my father on Zoom in South Africa. Mm-hmm. Oh. Now, he didn't die of COVID, but he died during COVID. We couldn't, I couldn't fly there.
I'm so sorry.
My uncle died from COVID.
Wow.
Because he was diabetic. So he was vulnerable.
I'm so sorry.
But how many people were killed by the hospitals?
Right. If you're speaking to a big crowd and you ask everybody to stand up if they have a loved one who died of COVID, and you ask people to sit down if their loved one died in the hospital, most of the people sit down. 90 to 95% of people sit down because the hospital protocols were the thing that was killing people. And it was incentivized that way through all the payments from the CARES Act. Like in California, for every COVID diagnosis a hospital got, $145,000 per diagnosis. So what hospital is not going to diagnose COVID?
It was like that everywhere.
Yeah.
It wasn't just here. It was like that everywhere. And there were different, there were two different tiers, right? Mm-hmm. If you died with COVID and if you died from COVID, I don't remember exactly what the distinction was.
Yeah.
But there were different amounts of money. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a motorcycle accident was with COVID because they tested you after you came to the hospital dead, which is illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't even know if it's true.
Exactly.
You literally don't even know if it's true.
So there were so many violations of civil rights. Our whole Bill of Rights was smashed down when we were locked down during COVID. So did you end up having new insights about the importance of our Bill of Rights? You already knew how important it was, right? But these violations were so severe. I think it woke a whole lot more people up to the importance of our Constitution, to the importance of our Bill of Rights. Did you see people waking up?
What I saw that was for me the most profound effect of COVID was that it brought together people who thought they were on completely opposite sides of the political spectrum, and suddenly they found common ground. And I think that was that anyone who believed in strengthening the immune system, right now suddenly you have the same thing in common. If you're living, in a red state, now you have as much in common with people in blue states,
right? Because
people were equally, targeted if they wanted alternative therapies or they didn't want to get vaccinated.
Right.
Suddenly we became, instead of being divided between red and blue, we became divided between the vaccinated and the unvaccinated.
That's right. That's right.
Right.
And 5 words to start a fight when we were locked down were, I have an immune system. That can start a fight.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that I think that for me was one of the most profound thing that I watched happen, was that I think it enabled RFK Jr. To rise. It was really the birth of the Maha movement.
Mm-hmm.
So you had people like Del Bigtree, who I had known for years, and he had been struggling alone for so long. And then I had like another person I worked with at a production company, and his son was I think almost 90% disabled from childhood vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
And I listened, and I was horrified. My heart broke for him, but I didn't understand how big a problem it was.
Oh, so you'd never really heard about the extent of vaccine injury before that?
No one in the world has as many vaccines as the United States for kids.
Right.
So I'd never encountered that. Like, I had done stories in the UK about vaccines causing autism, which were completely dismissed as conspiracy, right? But I had gone and done, I'd met with people in the Lake District and elsewhere. I remember doing these stories, meeting these families and hearing about this. But of course, there was no medical, there were no studies or science to really back it up, because they didn't do the studies because they didn't want to back it up. But you didn't know that at the time.
No.
At the time, a scientific study was everything, and it carried so much weight. So
Right.
I had learned about it. I knew of people that 100% believed the vaccines had caused autism, but I didn't have any concept that the vaccine schedule for newborn babies in America was just multiplying.
Yeah.
And now, I watch TV now, and there are ads, and you hear all about pharmaceutical companies advertising the news and how that played a role in the coverage of COVID and so on and so on. But I didn't understand that pharmaceutical advertising has taken over TV advertising.
It has. Yeah. In non-election years, Bobby Kennedy says it's 70% of the advertising
Well, there you
revenue.
go.
So who's going to bite the hand that feeds them? No one.
And I had not seen that, because I'm not a big TV watcher in that sense.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm more
But
a
people
TV
would
doer.
assume you would have had you would have seen that because you've been involved in the news for so long.
Well, I've seen it in the last few months.
Mm-hmm.
Because I didn't want to give any of these companies too much of my money. So I don't have ad-free things, and I had to watch ads. And eventually I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm paying the $5 extra a month. I'm already giving these people money. I can't do this anymore, because I don't even know what they're advertising. They're advertising drugs and vaccines now around the clock for diseases I've never heard of.
Mm-hmm.
And half the time they're saying, ask your doctor about Dupixent or whatever it happens to be. And I'm like, what is that for?
Right.
I don't know what that's for. I watched a whole ad. I watched the same ad 50 times.
They're just seeding my hypochondria.
It just shows that pharmaceutical companies have really taken over TV advertising.
They absolutely
I'm not
have.
surprised by that 70% number.
Yeah.
It's shocking to me how few commercials there are for anything else.
It's so true. We know so many of our listeners understand the relationship between health freedom and our personal and economic freedoms. It's the same principle. If you're one of our audience who's concerned about inflation, paper asset crises, and ongoing monetary crises, you may have already started accumulating gold and silver or are considering doing so. There's no gold dealer we know who's better positioned to serve the freedom community than Mish International in Menlo Park, California. I'm one of the many happy customers who's purchased gold or silver in their showroom, or I've had it delivered through their secure courier service. They are true veterans who are honest, fair, and reliable, and so knowledgeable regarding all the choices of gold and silver bars and coins to help you choose the products that fit your goals and your worldview. The principal, Robert Mish, is world-renowned for his expertise in rare coins as well. Write down this number, 650-324-9110. That's 650-324-9110. And visit mishinternational.com. That's MISH international.com to learn more about this notable company. So when we got locked down for COVID, you were not aware at that time of how bad the children's schedule was, that children were at that time getting 72 doses of 16 vaccines.
Oh.
You had no idea.
I vaccinated my kids.
But okay, and I did too for the first year of their lives. But so you really didn't know how injurious it was. Like you knew about the autism connection, but did you know about the connection with allergies, asthma, chronic illness, autoimmunity?
No.
So when did you learn that? What sparked you on that?
I think like a lot of people, I was a little surprised when the school told me I couldn't bring store-bought cupcakes to school for my daughter's birthday because they might have peanuts and they might have been prepared in a kitchen with peanut allergies. And one of the things that I'd talked with friends, about over the years is like, where did all these peanut allergies come from? Mm-hmm. Like, if someone had mentioned a peanut allergy when I was growing up in South Africa, people would have just laughed. I never knew a single person that had a peanut allergy. And then suddenly peanut allergies became this thing of everyday life, that there were so many, it was so prolific that people could actually, to really impact, like birthday rings are being canceled at school because we're not going to take the risk that someone's going to bring a cake prepared in the same room as a peanut.
Wow.
Yes. So the rise of nut allergies was one of the things that really alerted me to the fact that there were some very strange things happening with our health as a society that were not normal. Why?
Right. And so you asked why, and what were the first answers that came to you?
Vaccines.
Yeah. So you suspected the vaccines.
Mm-hmm. And then, I have a colleague and friend, Cheryl Atkinson.
Mm-hmm. She's great.
And Cheryl's done a lot of work on vaccines over the years. She had done a lot of work on mercury being in the vaccines, mercury being in other products. And so I talked to Cheryl, and when I came to CBS, I was told, "Oh, Cheryl's really nice. She's really great, but she's a little cuckoo. Oh. She thinks deodorant has aluminum in it, and it's causing cancer."
She was right.
Yeah,
yeah, but
she was right about all that stuff. Yeah. She was right about vaccines. She was right about deodorant. And the mercury. She was right about all these things. So I called Cheryl. I wanted you call people who study these things and know a lot about them. And so it was kind of a beginning for me. But when COVID happened, that was when I woke up to realize the next time I went to the doctor with my kids and they said, "Oh, it's time for her, whatever, my daughter, it's time for her, whatever, 5th grade or whatever it is, vaccines." I was like, what's in those vaccines? Can I see the ingredients?
You can ask a waiter what's in the food, but what happens when you ask a pediatrician the same question about a vaccine?
They said the doctor will call you, no vaccines today.
Oh.
That was the end of the visit.
You're kidding. That was their answer? Because they couldn't answer.
They wouldn't.
Wow.
They wouldn't answer and they're great, by the way, at my doctor's office. I love the girls there. But I don't know whose policy it was, but when I questioned what was in the vaccines, they said, "This is not a conversation we can have. You need to talk to the doctor. He'll be in touch." And he was.
Wow.
And I went to go and see him. This was during COVID though. So it was when, you would meet outside by the car, right? And he'd be in a full suit.
Yeah. A whole PPE.
Yeah. I think he had a PPE. I'm pretty sure.
And you had to wear a mask to talk to him, but you probably refused.
Yeah. No, I didn't refuse. Because my kids.
Yeah.
I wanted to help them.
Mama bears.
Yeah, I had to comply. So, and he said to me, "Well, there's a new adjutant in these vaccines that's supposed to be safer than aluminum." And I said, you mean aluminum is in the old vaccines that my children have already had? Because now my daughter's what? I don't know. She's 15 now. So how old was she during COVID? 10, 11. I said, so there was aluminum in the other vaccines. And he said, probably, yeah. And I said, and that's not good for my kids. And he said, well, not saying it's not good, but they say that this adjutant is safer. So I'm like,
and what adjuvant was he talking about?
I don't know.
Because it's aluminum.
I don't know, whatever was the new technology that they were using.
So interesting.
And so I just said, I don't trust it. They didn't tell us before that aluminum wasn't safe. And I don't like the fact that it did something to my children that wasn't what I thought it was. I feel deceived and betrayed. And he said, I don't blame you. Oh, I said, I understand.
Did he kick you out of the practice?
No.
No?
No, he's great. I love him. He's a great doctor.
That's amazing.
But it's a learning curve for the doctors too, you know.
Oh, big time.
Because like, for example, the American Pediatric Society, I said to him, what is with these forms that they want us to sign? He said, well, you don't have to do that if you don't want to. But it's the American Pediatric Society that has us put these forms out. And I said, well, you know, they're asking my 13, 14-year-old children who they're having sex with.
Oh.
And how many people they're having sex with, and if it's of the same sex or a different sex. What has this got to do with the American Pediatric Association? And why would my kids have to sign this when they're coming for a checkup? And by the way, why do the forms instruct the children that they have to answer this on their own with no input from the parents and away from their parents? Right. And now you're giving me the same form to fill out. You're giving the parent the same form. Oh. They're going to compare the record.
It's like the Newlywed Show. It better match or you're a bad parent.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And that's the American Pediatric Association, which is, guess what, funded by? You'll never guess. This is going to be the hardest question you've ever been asked in your whole life.
Really? Because I know it's 10% funded by the HHS and about 10% by pharma, and 50% by membership fees. Because I looked this up recently. But who else funds them?
The Open Society Foundation.
The Open Society Foundation.
George Soros.
Oh, it's George Soros. Really?
That's where some of their money comes from.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And what's the Open Society Foundation up to?
Well, as a few doctors put it to me, pediatricians who I asked about this, they said, well, when the American Pediatrics Association began, it was really there so that pediatricians could consult with other pediatricians, right? You could get some advice. You could share information and cases, and you could be a better doctor. Mm-hmm. You could be better with kids. And that's how it began, but it was completely and utterly taken over by woke ideology. And then it became an enforcement arm, right? This is how we want your kids to be raised and treated. And this is the body through which we can enforce compliance.
So is this about medicalizing the children as an excuse to remove them from the parents because the parents are dangerous to their kids? Because I see a trend in that.
There's surveillance.
Yeah.
It's surveillance because they ask things like, do you have guns in the house? Oh. Do you feel safe at home?
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
Through the kids.
So questions on these forms.
They're turning the kids into spies.
And they also
private things in your home.
Now remember, these are forms that when you go to the doctor's office and they ask you to fill them out, they tell you have to do it separately. You as the parent can't be there when your child is doing this form. And that you cannot share and you cannot, these have to be answered individually. So first of all, why would you agree to that?
I wouldn't. And they weren't doing that when my kids were growing up. I would have refused. But it's probably hard to refuse.
Well, most people just don't think about it. You go to the doctor's office, I trust my doctor.
Right.
I love the nursing staff. They're wonderful. They've helped me so many times. Here's your forms to fill out. So now, and remember, we always fill out forms at the doctor. Every year you have to update your forms and all the rest of it. And when you go to a new doctor, you got new forms. So you don't realize unless you ask that these are not their forms.
Oh, they're not.
They don't come from the doctor's office. They come from the American Pediatric Association. And the American Pediatric Association tells their members that they need to collect this information from their patients and then send it back to them. So it's not my local doctor who's doing it, but I assume he's endorsed it.
Right.
Because it's given, and I assume I have to do it because I have to fill out all the other forms for him to treat my kids.
Right, it's just one more form.
So until my husband called me from the doctor's office because I wasn't with him, and he's like, I want to read you these questions that they're asking our children. And I've been, and they've been instructed to answer on their own and not to talk to their parents. And I've been given the same form. And I'm like, are you actually filling this out? And he's like, yes. I said, why? And he said, I don't know. I said, tell them you're not doing it. He said, I'm absolutely telling them not to. Tore up the forms, kids to my kids, tore up their forms. And so he said, he went to them and said, do I have to fill this out? They said, no. So I said, okay, good. Boom, boom, done.
Wow. And what do we think the AAP is doing with all that data? Are they using it in aggregate, or are they trying to like target certain families for political reasons? What are they doing?
Well, if they're asking you, do you have guns at home?
Mm-hmm. They're surveilling on behalf of the deep state.
Well, people who, first of all, that means that they can identify where the guns are.
Mm-hmm.
And then if your child says anything, either innocently or inadvertently or whatever, that can be used against you, or you're not safe, or you're mentally unstable, or you drink too much, your child says you're violent. And my parents have anger issues. They fight all the time. Oh, it's not safe for your children. We need to take your guns. Right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. So you can see how that information is used. And then on top of that, if you have political opponents, you want to find any dirt on them or any ways to take them out, you have it.
These are pediatric forms.
Data collection are all surveillance systems.
Right.
Some are used for good and a lot of them are used for bad.
I just call it all data rape because I feel like I'm being raped every time I have to give the answer to a question like that.
It is, although having been raped.
Yes, it's not quite the same.
I could say it's just a teeny bit different.
Very violent situation.
But I do know what you mean. In a sense, it is like that. It is an extreme violation of our sovereignty and our privacy and our souls and our minds and our whole person. So I get it from that concept. And, the other thing that they do with this information that they're collecting is they are also, they're figuring out who to target and how to target you. And they can use it for whatever they want. But many years ago, at least 20 years ago, a friend of mine is a neuroscientist. And he told me back in 2009 easily, he said to me, he doesn't see any normal doctors anymore. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, we have something called underground medicine. And I said, what is that? And he said, can't tell you a lot about it because they'll come after us. And he said, but it's doctors and we treat each other off the books underground because we know that digital records, digital medicine is the death of medicine. Yeah. It is an implementation of a surveillance system. And he said they will use it for whatever they need. I said, well, like what? And he said, well, if your doctor writes in the notes that you're a non-compliant patient, you'll be flagged for non-compliance.
Right.
That in the health world, that can be, well, you're going to have to get to the back of the line for treatment because you're a non-compliant patient, or we're not treating you because you have a history of non-compliance, or we're not insuring you because you're non-compliant. So therefore you're uninsurable because you don't follow doctor's orders.
Wow.
So why would we insure you?
Wow.
And he said it really doesn't matter. I mean, there's 400 different ways that they will use that information against you. And he said too that Ancestry.com and all of these things, he said, you watch. That is a roadmap for the HMOs. Why are the health companies buying that kind of data? Because they know if you have a history of heart disease in your family, and then they can get exceptions to your policy, or they can not insure you at all.
Wow. Well, and I'm sure they want to lose a whole lot of people because the whole nation is so sick. Why do they want to keep insuring all of us?
Money.
Right.
Because they make so much money out of it. It's a money laundering system. I mean, why else, do they get such good rates? And everything is in the favor of the insurance companies.
Exactly.
They scratch each other's backs. But if you don't have insurance, your surgery is going to cost you, 10, 20 times more.
Right. Well, and what's so shocking to those of us who are aware of vaccine dangers is that insurance companies are reimbursing for all these vaccination appointments, and they're also shelling out for all the treatments for chronic illnesses. And Bobby Kennedy famously said in 2019, the pharmaceutical companies are making $60 billion a year on pharmaceuticals, but they're making $500 billion selling us back the treatments to cure all the chronic illnesses that we have. And they don't say cure either. just to treat them.
Just to treat
Because
them.
the perfect person is someone who can still work but has to be on medication the rest of their life.
So why would you want that person to have a strong immune system that prevents them from getting sick much of the time?
That's exactly right.
Oh, no, we don't want that. Right. Yeah. So, it's kind of like therapy. I mean, have you ever heard anyone say, I had depression, then I went and had therapy and I was cured?
It just goes on and on and
on. No one's ever cured.
And so this is all going towards surveillance and the surveillance technocracy. And I saw it for really, really clearly for the first time in 2019 in California when they passed a law called SB 276. And that established an anti-vaxxer database called CAIR-ME, California Immunization Registry-Medical Exemption. And that's when I knew that in combination with the Real ID, which I already knew about, that would become our first social credit score. And it wasn't just going to be for the vaccine exceptions for children, that adults were going to be in that database. And they came and they did it a couple of years later with COVID. And we're still going. I mean, that's not the end of the surveillance technocracy.
No, don't you remember, was it about 15 years ago probably about 8 years ago, that California passed a law that every child is surveilled from the time they enter the school system. And it was so that we could monitor and ensure equal access to education. But now your child's being monitored. What do you think they do with all those Chromebooks? You know, every kid has to have a Chromebook at school now. So Google Chrome is collecting on your children. Because, you know, they don't just use it for their schoolwork.
No.
You know.
Anything that's free. There's no such thing as a free lunch. I learned that in business school.
No such thing. I learned it from my mother growing up.
Yeah.
She told us that all the time. There's no such thing as free.
Right.
And so, in fact, I used to tell my kids all that. And when we moved to our little town and we moved in next door an old candy store, I remember my son, because my kids would go back and forth to the candy store. And he came back one time and he threw open the front door and he's like, Mom, he's yelling for me, you were wrong. You were wrong. And I said, what do you mean? I was upstairs. I came to find him. He's like 6 or something. And I said, what do you mean I was wrong? He said, you said there's nothing free. And that's not true because these were free. And he held up a little strip of those little wax bottles of candy that have the liquid candy inside them. I said, those are free. He said, yes, I went to the candy store and I had my money because I'd given him the money and counted it out. And I gave it to the girl and she's like, no, you can have that. So he was so excited. He couldn't decide if he was more excited about having the candy for free or me being wrong, which I think was the part he liked the most. Is that I was wrong.
Mom
I'd ingrained at them so much that nothing is free that he was just beside himself when he just said, this was free, Mom. I said, was it, Joe? Was it? I let him have that one.
And that's a good lesson in life, that there is nothing free. And the other lesson really is that anything that's being offered to us for our convenience, especially by the government, is really designed to surveil us or kill us eventually, right?
What's the price of that convenience?
Right.
That's what you got to ask yourself. Why are they giving this to me for free? It's kind of like when you're sitting at the poker table and you're looking around wondering who's the mark. That means you're the mark. Okay,
That's
so
right.
when they say it's free, so then what's for sale? If this isn't for sale, if this is free, what's for sale? And that's your soul.
Yeah, our soul, us, and our data.
Yeah.
And
because fifth generation warfare, which we're in now, is the battle for your mind, information warfare. But sixth generation warfare is the battle for your soul.
Really?
And we're in the transition phase between fifth and sixth.
Wow. How do we know when we're going into the sixth? Like, what are the signs? What are the tells?
You get chipped at birth instead of vaccinated.
Oh.
Wow. I mean, because we already have the liquid nanoparticles. And people say, oh, that's conspiracy. Really? Did you take your dog to the vet? Did you get your dog chipped? I mean, how many people out there got their animals chipped? That technology's been around for a long time now.
Right.
So, of course, they can chip us.
Of course they can. In fact, you said something really interesting about chipping your dog because you're always with your dog, right? So they know where you are. And you said that in December. I'm not saying that myself.
Yeah. Well, that's what my husband said to me. He said, I'm not getting this dog chipped. And I said, why not? And he said, because they'll know where I am by following my dog. You know, in the Iraq War, I remember in the being in Baghdad when the Marines came in, and one of the things that they showed me when I went out on an operation was they had something called Blue Force Tracker. And Blue Force Tracker was something that was installed on every military vehicle. And it allowed the commanders to stand in the operations room and see all of their forces across the battlefield, right? In real time, as stationary, moving, etc. Well, if you were in like a tier 1 special operations unit, like a Green Beret, something like that, I believe your chip was in your uniform. So it was on each individual soldier, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you were in the clandestine services, the chip was in your skull.
Wow. And that's what's coming.
Well,
it might be in your wrist.
It's already here.
Yeah.
What isn't here is the willingness of the people to be chipped.
Right.
So the technology exists. It predates the level of acceptance in society.
Is there any truth to transmissibility of what was injected into people when they got COVID shots? Are those antennas, receivers, transmitters?
I don't know, because I'm not an expert on that.
Okay.
I've obviously heard people talk about it a lot and read about it, but before I could say whether there's truth to that, I would have to know a lot more. What I can tell you is that people who are experts in communications have told me multiple times that the number of towers doesn't make sense from a communications point of view. That they know typically, if you deal with these types of communication systems, you know how far towers are normally staggered apart, what the issues are in terms of land, where you would put that tower and so on. And what they've noticed, and I'm sure people can see this for themselves, is you can look around you and there's like 5 towers. Mm-hmm. You don't need 5 towers around you for the communication system that you have. So that means it's there for something else.
For the Internet
for some
of
other
things,
reason.
The Internet of Things and the Internet of Bodies.
Well,
right?
that would make sense. That
Yeah.
would be logical.
Yes.
And that would work. But can I prove that? Do I know that for a
Right.
fact?
Right.
No. So there's a distinction, right? Certainly, I mean, the Internet of Things is real.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the poker thing, right? We become the thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I've heard Elon Musk, who's done amazing things, but I've heard him talk about things that I find troubling. And one of them is that, you'll have this enhanced experience if you hook up to the hive, right?
Right. That's the Borg.
I don't want that.
No, I don't want that either. I don't want to be the Borg.
I don't want to know what my brain begins and ends. I don't want to not know that.
Right.
I don't want to know whose memories you're giving me. I mean, because there's obviously a lot of good that can be done
Mm-hmm.
with much of this technology. And I said to another friend of mine whose husband was blinded in the war in Afghanistan, a Delta operator, really incredible couple. Love them very, very much. And we were talking and I said, if he could see again, if he could get a bionic eye, he would do it, wouldn't he?
Yeah.
And she said, she thought about it and she said, absolutely, without a doubt. He's never seen our youngest daughter. Mm. So there's lots of ways they get you to buy in to the technology.
Yeah, there's beneficial use cases. Yep.
Of course, if you're paralyzed and someone can give you the ability to walk again, would you say no?
No.
The problem is with a bionic eye, can it be hacked? Are you looking at what you're really looking at? Is it really in front of you?
Oh, right.
Is it?
It could drive someone crazy.
Could drive someone to anything.
And you could surveil anyone through that eye.
Are you really looking at your child?
Right. Oh, yeah, then what's reality?
It becomes very hard. And it's the same thing with an Alzheimer's patient. I think Musk has been working on giving people back their memories, right? How do you know they're yours?
Right. Oh, that's frightening. That's really frightening. And I think we'll close out here, but I do know that we're all becoming the Internet of Bodies as soon as you get a biometric scan of your face. They've taken 35 points from ear to ear.
Every time you pick up your phone,
yeah,
they've taken a scan of your face.
Yeah. So you're part of the Internet of Bodies if you have a cell phone.
Or a computer. Yeah. Or you walk past a camera.
Yep.
It's
coming.
I mean, that technology exists, but the only thing that protects us from it is the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. So that's why they want you to agree to facial recognition to open your iPhone, because they have captured it already. They have the data, but they need your permission
to
use it.
That's right.
That's why I say no to everything.
Right. And I heard that if you're apprehended by the police, they can get in your phone if you have facial recognition. That's not a violation. That's not considered a violation of the search and seizure laws. They just hold it up to your face and they're in your phone. But if you have a code that you have to type in, they can't make you type the code.
Mm-hmm.
It's very interesting.
The whole digital world is unregulated. I mean, we assume that the Constitution applies in the digital realm, but if you start to look at the court cases, that's not it. It's not the way it is at all. Like, for example, you own your image in the real world, right?
Right.
You don't own it online.
Right.
You post a picture on Facebook. Facebook now owns your image. You post it on Snapchat. They own your image, and so on and so on. But also, even worse than that, anybody can make an NFT of your image.
What's an NFT?
A non-fungible token. It's like a patent.
What do they do with that?
They can do whatever they want. They can put you on the dark web and have people pay to rape you.
Ugh.
In cyberspace.
Ew.
And they do that. Oh. They have technology where this is what they do with kids, because I do some work in counter trafficking, and I learned from the guys on dealing with this. They can walk around your child on the street or in a public place, take a full 3D scan of them, make an NFT of their image, put them on the dark web, and then you use Oculus 3D glasses to brutalize and rape them online. And they want real kids. They ask. This is a real kid,
they don't want AI
right?
kids. No, I didn't think I'd feel like throwing up in this interview.
Sorry.
That's awful.
I have that effect on people.
That's one of the reasons why we
My
love you.
husband's vomiting every day.
So where are we going from here? Is there anything we can do to hold back?
We need a digital bill of rights.
Okay.
That's one of the first, easiest, most practical, most kind of uncontroversial things that you could ask for. Is a digital bill of rights to preserve the rights that you have in the real world, preserve them in the digital world.
Okay.
That is so important. Number one. Number two, practice digital hygiene. Find out what it is. I mean, it's about clearing out your cookies, and just be aware that if you download an app, that they're tracking you in the background and they're selling your data and whatever. Say no. Like, take that extra 30 seconds or a couple of minutes, click on the policy and reject all unnecessary cookies. Reject them. Don't accept them. Don't just go along with them. Yes, it's not so convenient, but it's not that inconvenient. You know what I mean? It's like, we can all manage that. I mean, certainly I'm not reading 400 pages of, whatever to watch a movie. But you certainly, if you're going to be doing something online, take the 30 seconds to reject all of those unnecessary collection systems. And then you can, if you use maps, like I use maps, I am guilty of this, but maps is tracking your every movement, whether you search that address on your maps or not. So they're building a pattern of life that shows exactly where you go, when, how, when you're not moving, when you are moving. All of these things are roadmaps, how to they're not there just to sell you something that you didn't know you wanted. It's not some innocent thing. Well, if I don't want to buy a new motorbike, I don't have to. It's not about that. It's about manipulating your behavior and your thought, right? In order to control you. And so it's very important for people to recognize that, to learn about that, educate themselves. Don't take my word for it. Figure it out on your own. And then make sure that there are alternatives that you can use. Like, there are other mapping systems where they don't sell your data or where they don't store your data yet, because people can change their policies whenever they want to, right? They get bought out and whatever. So you've got to stay vigilant. You've got to stay well informed. You've got to practice digital hygiene, clear out your cookies, clear out your history, clear out your the track, the map of where you've been. You can go, you have these options in these apps. Deny them the right, turn off all of your notifications. You know where your messages come from. You do not need, because those are the little hooks that they're dragging you back because they want you in their world. So there's a lot of things that people can do. Stand up to it. Say no to battery centers. Say no to data centers. Question the information that they give you. Like, why do they call it a cloud? Because they want you to think, it goes up into the sky and it just vaporizes.
Right.
No, it doesn't. It
Never.
Goes on towers, it goes on undersea cables, it goes through a physical infrastructure, And that physical infrastructure has an impact on the environment. So ask them, use their arguments against them, because they don't want brick and mortar stores, right? Because we're creating a carbon footprint and that's bad. Okay, but how about your data centers? What's the carbon footprint of a data center?
That's right.
How much electricity are you using? How much water are you using? Now they're trying to make it so they recycle the water, but how many data centers are using recycled water? What do those cost to operate? What's your carbon footprint from running that operation or building that? Like what it takes to build a wind turbine, they're so massive. And what it takes to dismantle them dwarfs the benefit that provides to the environment. So that doesn't seem like a very good solution then to the problem, right? Mm-hmm. So it gives you the ability to question these things and think about data centers. What happens to your computer if you leave it on? It gets hot. Mm-hmm. So you build data centers in the middle of the desert in Nevada because nobody's out there to see what you're doing and you want to do it in secret. Well, now you have to have backup systems, don't you?
And the
now you have
resources.
To cool it all. You have to keep it cool 24 hours a day.
Right.
And so, being aware of these things, finding out about them, figuring out, preventing them from doing it. Like, why on earth did Texas allow Greg Abbott to do a carbon capture plant costing taxpayers billions of dollars? Are you nuts? We need carbon for life on Earth.
That's right.
The Amazon is shrinking because not from loggers as much as it is from the lack of carbon dioxide in the air. Well, the green spaces, what do you think happens to the green spaces on Earth when you're short of carbon dioxide? And we're in a carbon dioxide drought.
They can't thrive.
No.
Right.
And they can't grow.
Right.
So be aware of these things, question them, and fight to hold on to your rights before they're all gone, before it's too late.
That's right. If we let our rights go away now, we will never get them back.
No, our children will be chipped and they'll be fenced in, geo-fenced into a certain area, and they'll be able to, find you or hunt you down with drones without even people. And there's no accountability, right? In the when you're dealing with AI,
right,
or you're dealing with a voice,
right. There's not a person pulling the trigger.
There's no accountability,
right?
You can say to a machine when you call someone, the option you're giving me, the options, you just laid out 5 options. I need to talk to someone about a different option. And it goes through the options again, right? Because it's a machine. Whereas a human being would be forced to say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't have anyone who could deal with that, or here's the right person.
Right.
Yeah, so there's no accountability with any of this unless we demand it, because someone made it. Someone's operating it. Someone's profiting from it. And our stuff doesn't go into the air. Someone owns the towers. Someone owns the undersea cables. So think about this. In 152 countries in the world, Ericsson runs the National Child Exploitation Hotline.
They do? I didn't know that.
So when people report child porn, they store it.
It goes to a private company?
Goes to their servers.
That's bizarre.
If you read the fine print, everything you do on an app belongs to that company or a device or with certain software. They own a worldwide, unlimited, perpetual copyright to everything you do. So you're an architect, you design a plan, you email it to your staff. Well, the people, whatever software you used to email with, they own it too. They just don't tell you they do. Well, they do tell you. They put in that fine print that no one reads. And they don't use it yet because people would object.
Right.
And because the laws still exist that give us enough room to fight such egregious violations, right? Copyright laws and this and that, whatever else someone could use depending on the situation. So we're not ready. We're not compliant enough yet to just accept that. But it doesn't mean they don't have the right. Every photograph you've ever posted, they own a copy of. They could use it in their advertising if they want to. They just don't because they know there'd be an outcry.
There sure would. So I am more than ever behind a digital bill of rights. I understand more than I did before this interview, and I thank you for that. And I thank you for spending this time with me today. Really, really appreciate it. It's been a joy to get to know you and have this conversation, and for enlightening everybody who gets to watch this interview.
Thank you, Alix. I love what you do. And I'm so grateful because none of us, we're all stronger when we fight together.
We sure are. Thank you, Lara Logan. You're the best.
Thank you.
We are so happy to have as our prime sponsor, Mish International, Northern California's acclaimed specialists in rare coins and gold and silver investments. Our friend and supporter, Robert Mish, is the same principal that started the company back in 1963, and he's still there every day with 63 years of experience. He has integrity, reliability, and fair pricing, whether you're buying or selling. When you have business to do with precious metals, you'll always be treated well at Mish International. Call 650-324-9110 and tell Robert that Alex sent you.